Hello, today I want to talk about the Venthyr Covenant and everything it has to offer you and me as Frost DKs. So let's go ahead and hop right into it. First off, I just gotta say, I have a very long history of publicly saying that I do not like Breath of Sindragosa. I don't think it's a good ability, I don't think it's very fun, I don't think it's good gameplay, but with all that being said, I really like the way that Breath of Sindragosa works with the Venthyr Covenant. I like it so much so that I'm considering making a second DK for Shadowlands just so I can have access to that Venthyr ability. And it's not because like I need to have one for PvE. I'm going to be doing Maldraxxus in PvE. My guild will be, they'll live, they'll survive, you know, but this is actually a lot of fun. So let's go ahead and talk about what you can do. All right, so first let's talk about the Covenant signature ability, Door of Shadows. This is the ability that everybody gets when they join the Venthyr Covenant. And what this ability does is it's a 1.5 second cast with a 35-yard range on a 1-minute cooldown. And it says wend through the shadows appearing at the targeted location. Basically, it's a teleport. So this is what it looks like in action. You just will decide where you want to go. I'm going to go over here. I have an @cursor macro, so I don't actually have to select, and your character casts it and you teleport. I'm not a big fan of cast bars on a melee DPS. I just think that it breaks up the rhythm of the class quite a bit. And that's definitely like a personal opinion kind of thing. I know a lot of you are going to like this ability and think it's really powerful, and it is. It is still very powerful and a very cool and unique ability. So now let's talk about the ability that Death Knights get in particular when they join the Venthyr Covenant. That ability is called Swarming Mist. Swarming Mist costs 1 rune, it's an instant cast, and it has a 1-minute cooldown. It says a heavy mist surrounds you for 8 seconds, increasing your dodge by 10%. Deals 347 shadow damage every 1 second to enemies within 10 yards. Every time it deals damage, you gain 3 runic power, up to a maximum of 15 runic power. Basically, this ability gives you runic power whenever it hits and does damage to opponents. It will give you runic power every single second, up to a maximum of 15, which means that you can get the full maximum effect out of this ability runic power wise off of 5 targets. At that point, you will get no more extra runic power, whether it's 6, 7, 8, 9, or even 10 enemies that are around you. So this ability, you're probably already thinking it, works perfectly for Breath of Sindragosa, which brings us into what does this ability allow us to really do? Well, first off, let's talk about the damage. The damage, I'll go ahead and throw a screenshot up on the screen right now. The damage isn't that good. It's honestly pretty minute. It does almost nothing. So the damage for this ability is certainly not the reason that we are going to want to be taking it. It is certainly the runic power, and that's where Breath of Sindragosa comes in. Now, right now, as you can see, I'm playing a 2-hand Frost DK. And so, yeah, that means, yes, I'm about to show you 2-hand Breath of Sindragosa. This is not the best way to play this, but it is the most fun way to play this for me. And so I'm going to go ahead and showcase this to you as a 2-hand Frost DK, but I'll go ahead and throw the numbers on the screen now of the performance that I got out of this ability as a dual wield, as a 2-hand, and in different multiple target situations. These are all 5-minute segments, so this is basically the average DPS you can expect over 5 minutes worth of time. This includes all of the dead time between Breath of Sindragosas. This includes all of it. Beside that, you will see the burst, and this is the highest potential burst you can reach in a short window during Breath of Sindragosa. So this will give you an idea of what your DPS will look like over the course of a dungeon, essentially, and over the course of a burst period on a boss. Alright, so before I show you what this ability looks like in combat and how I'm using it with Breath of Sindragosa to get the full maximum potential out of it, let me show you guys which legendary I'm using because it is extremely important to this build. The legendary I'm using is the Rage of the Frozen Champion, which makes Obliterate have a 15% increased chance to trigger Rhyme, and Howling Blast generates 8 runic power while Rhyme is active. This inserts much more runic power into our rotation, and this allows us to balance back and forth between Obliterate and Howling Blast procs in order to just do more damage and to put out more runic power generation and keep that Breath of Sindragosa going for as long as possible. Since we're running this talent, I'm going ahead and running Avalanche. I did test it, and it is very much worth it to run Avalanche when running this. You get so many Rhyme procs. The Avalanche talent will absolutely carry you much further than Frozen Pulse, especially as a two-hand Frost DK. Alright, so now let's go ahead and start hitting some target dummies. We're going to come in here and we're going to start with our base rotation to build up a full runic power bar, and pretty much this is full enough for me. So I'm going to go ahead and pop these two cooldowns. I'm going to pop my dragon, and we're going to go straight into BOS, Breath of Sindragosa. We'll let it get a few ticks there. I don't want to cap too hard, but at the same time, we don't want our DPS to fall. So I'm just going to try and hit my abilities as fast as I can without capping too far on runic power. Now, Swarming Mist comes into the play here about there, and I don't actually activate this at the beginning because what happens is you have too much runic power to even spend. You've got Hypothermic Presence rolling, you've got all this stuff rolling, and your runic power bar just isn't going to go down at all. And basically, you're just kind of wasting DPS and potential. So instead, what I do is I wait until a little bit later in the Breath of Sindragosa to actually pop my Swarming Mist. That way it carries me on a little bit further. My record for a Breath of Sindragosa as a dual wield Frost DK as a Venthyr is 48 seconds. 48 seconds of uptime. That meant I even got to pop Hypothermic Presence for a second time during my burst. As a two-hand Frost DK is a little bit lower, it's about 40 seconds. And so that's still not bad. That's still a huge Breath of Sindragosa, and it's absolutely a ton of fun. Now, as you can see, you're watching some B-roll of the Halls of Atonement dungeon that I did here on the beta, and I'm absolutely destroying the meters. I mean, it's not even a competition. Now, I'm not running with a lot of bursty melee DPS in this dungeon, and that is certainly a part of the reason why I am so high up on this so often, but never once was I even close to being dethroned as top DPS, and overall it felt really good. When you look at my damage output over the course of a dungeon, it's very clear that this Venthyr ability easily puts out more damage over the course of a dungeon than any of the other Covenant abilities. Now, this does bring us into a downside for this ability and for the Venthyr, and that is that if you're not going to play Breath of Sindragosa, then you're going to have a tough time. See, runic power is not a resource that we are running out of in many of our builds. It's not a resource that really matters a whole lot anymore. It is still very important, and you know, there are times where you're going to wish you had more runic power, but generally speaking, it's not really a problem that needs to be solved. And so ultimately what you find is that in any build outside of the Venthyr build, or outside of the BOS build, the Breath of Sindragosa build, it just doesn't do that well. And so that's definitely a downside, that if you decide to go Venthyr as a Frost DK, then you are pretty much signing your talent tree away to be a Breath of Sindragosa talent tree for the rest of your time as a Venthyr. And I know that that's not going to be very ideal for most people. It's not ideal for me, and that's why I won't be maining Venthyr. But I do gotta say that, at least in my opinion, it is a tremendous amount of fun. It's almost as fun as Maldraxxus, which if you guys have seen my Maldraxxus video, then you know how much I love that Necrolord ability. So I'm really excited to be able to share this with you. So with that being said, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about PvP. In PvP, Breath of Sindragosa is not a very good ability if you don't already know. The problem is it's fine up until, you know, maybe 18, 1900, maybe even 2k, but eventually people are going to wise up, and what always happens is they're going to start CCing you in the middle of it, they're going to start kiting you in the middle of it, they're going to use immunities while you're using it so that you can't build up any more runic power, and ultimately what's going to happen is you're going to get shut down. No respectable team above 18, 19, 2k-ish rating is going to ever let you get away with doing a 45-second Breath of Sindragosa on them. It's not going to happen. However, in lower rated arenas and skirmishes, you definitely can have a lot of fun because people just don't know what to do. They're like, oh my god, what is this? You know, and they freak out. And it's just a lot of fun, and I'm enjoying it. So I have had a lot of fun playing with this in PvP. It does absolutely work. But if your goal is to push rating, then this is not going to be the Covenant that you want to run with. The Necrolord or the Kyrian both serve much more general and versatile purposes than this really does. Now that we talked about it in PvE, now that we've talked about it in PvP, let's talk about their Soulbind abilities and what they actually do for you. So we come over here and we look at the Soulbinds. Right now, I am running Nagia the Mistblade. We just recently got quite a bit of a turnaround, like literally, on these Soulbinds. So this Thrill Seeker ability used to be at the bottom. They've now made it where like the best abilities now come at the very top so that you have them from the very get-go, which I'm definitely a fan of. And they kind of restructured some things, gave you some a little bit more enticing choices over just pick two, the two potency conduits and would take whatever they give you. But ultimately, the ultimate abilities are still the most important. So Thrill Seeker here, while in combat, you gain a stack of Thrill Seeker every 2 seconds, or 4 stacks on killing an enemy. At 40 stacks, Thrill Seeker is consumed to grant you Euphoria, increasing your haste by 20% for 10 seconds. Thrill Seeker decays rapidly while you are not in combat. Thrill Seeker is a really powerful ability. 20% haste for any class in the game is a very, very strong buff. And you get it fairly regularly too, because you'll get this about every 80 seconds in combat, and in PvE when you're dropping lots and lots of big pulls and all that, especially with this kind of ability, your tank is going to realize very quickly that, oh, just pull everything and we do more damage, kind of like an Unholy DK mentality of just get as many enemies in front of this DK as possible and he will annihilate them. So what you see is this activating quite a bit, and like I said, is very powerful and definitely one of my favorite abilities on this Soulbind tree. Outside of that, we have some basic ones. Door of Shadows disorients all nearby enemies at the target location for 6 seconds when you appear. This sounds really good in PvE, but it is a little, or PvP, sorry, but it is a little bit of a trap. This circle right here, that outline was, everybody can see it, first of all. You can see it, I can see it, this guy over here could see it, his mom could see it, their dog could see it too. The problem with this is that that's the circle that causes the disorient. So inside that circle, if you drop there, anything standing there is going to get disoriented. But since everybody can see it, this once again comes back to, in PvP, very, very few people are ever going to fall for it. They're going to see the red circle of death and they are going to get out of it as fast as possible. But once again, if you're not pushing rating in PvP, if you're casually doing PvP or world PvP, then you're definitely going to be able to get some people trapped in this thing, especially early X-Pack. And so that definitely has a little bit of fun connected to it, but ultimately isn't that big of a deal. Now then, if we look over here, we got Fancy Footwork. Door of Shadows increases your movement speed by 40%, decaying over 6 seconds. This sounds really interesting to me, but since you have to take that endurance conduit, that's kind of a bummer because you really want those potency conduits if you can get them. We just recently got a nerf on some of them. For us in particular, Eradicating Blow was a pretty hefty hit, and so it does give a little bit more room to play around with other pathing and not feeling so forced and just grabbing 2 potency conduits. But I'm still thinking that for most of the time, you're gonna want the 2 potency conduits unless there's a really good option or a really niche scenario that calls for you leaving it. See, this one's pretty nice, and as the duration of incoming interrupt, snare, and root effects are reduced by 25%. This one over here is good for PvE. The benefit of well-fed, flask, weapon enchant, and rune forge effects are increased by 20%. This is very nice. Once again, you got to take that endurance conduit, and so there is a bit of a trade-off there, and you've really got to decide for yourself, is that trade-off worth it? Down here in Theotar the Mad Duke's tree, we have some very interesting ones. His ultimate ability, Soothing Shade. Your spells and abilities have a chance to call Tubbins and Gubbins to your side for 12 seconds. Parasol in hand, standing in the shaded area grants you 525 mastery. And basically it puts a shaded circle on the ground. It's kind of small. I don't have any footage of it to show you. I've only seen other people use the ability, but it's not that friendly. I don't personally think that it's something that you can reliably stand in, even in PvE, because if it spawns too far away from the pack, then you're not even hitting the pack anymore trying to stand in this thing. So ultimately, it's not an ability that I'm a huge fan of, even in PvE, but there are some other interesting choices on this tree that definitely makes Theotar the Mad Duke look very interesting, especially for PvE. And that is Watch for Shoes. Door of Shadows frees you from roots and snares, which is more PP oriented. Leisurely Gait. Door of Shadows has 2 charges, but its cooldown is increased by 30 seconds. That's really cool. That's going to be really strong for raiders trying to get out of raid mechanics, and even in certain Mythic Plus dungeons where you know that there's going to be a lot of movement and intense fights or affixes for that week. This one is one that has had a lot of people talking, and that is Refined Palate. The effects of combat potions last 100% to 200% longer. That's absolutely crazy. As I heard Preach the other night, just joking, saying someone's gonna make a weak aura for this, and everybody's just gonna pop pre-pots until the majority of the group has the 200% longer bonus, and then pull the boss. And it's like, oh no, that sounds completely awful, and I hope that that doesn't happen. But there's some really interesting ones in here, much more interesting than the Night Fae ones, in my opinion. And ultimately, yeah, Draven over here is much more of a tank-oriented kind of thing. His ultimate is damage taken below 40% is reduced by 10%. Upon death, you leave behind a stone husk, which shatters after 3 seconds, inflicting 100% of your maximum health and damage split among nearby enemies. This could be really good as a blood DK. I mean, imagine a blood DK with all their HP. Oh my gosh. So there's definitely some interesting ones here too. And Dora's Shadows grants you a shield that absorbs damage equal to 15% of your maximum health. All these percentage-based health abilities, man. This is so good for a blood DK, but not very good for a frost DK ultimately, but very interesting to see indeed. So overall, these Soulbinds are very interesting. A lot of interesting picks for PvP and PvE. A lot of interesting picks for your various specs if you're looking to play stuff outside of Frost. And ultimately, I would say their Soulbind tree is pretty good. All in all, I have to say that the Venthyr Covenant is my second favorite Covenant without a doubt. It's actually a lot of fun, and this will be the only time you'll ever hear me say in my entire life that I had fun using Breath of Sindragosa. But I really feel like this adds that extra layer of thought to it that it was really missing for me at this point to really kind of make it a fun ability. It'll be interesting to see what other ideas the community comes up with to increase our runic power generation. It'll be interesting to see if Blizzard has to put in some, like, after 50 seconds or something, Breath of Sindragosa automatically falls off. I honestly wonder if there's not something like that already in place in the game, because I've had a few times when Breath of Sindragosa fell off, and I'm pretty certain that it really shouldn't have. I had like 50 runic power, and all of a sudden it just stops around the 48-second mark, and it's like, Blizzard, are you fun detecting this? You know, I think the Venthyr are awesome, and in my opinion, I think they are the best PvE Covenant so far for Frost DKs. So thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you all have a great day.